Kate Williams had always been different from other children in the small village of Millbrook. While other kids played in the meadows and chased butterflies, Kate spent her afternoons in the local library, reading everything she could find about history, science, and faraway places. Her bright blue eyes sparkled with curiosity, and her gentle nature made everyone in the village love her dearly. Kate lived with her grandmother, Eleanor, in a modest cottage at the edge of town. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was just 5 years old, leaving her in the care of the wise old woman who had raised her mother. Eleanor was known throughout the village for her kindness and her ability to help anyone in need. She taught Kate the importance of compassion, humility, and standing up for what was right. As Kate grew older, her intelligence became more apparent. She excelled in every subject at school and showed remarkable maturity for her age. Her teachers often said she had an old soul, understanding complex problems that puzzled even adults. Despite her academic achievements, Kate remained humble and always ready to help her classmates with their studies. The village of Millbrook was facing difficult times. Many families struggled to make ends meet as the local factory had closed down, leaving hundreds of people without work. Kate watched as her neighbors worried about paying their bills and feeding their children. She saw the sadness in their eyes and felt their pain as if it were her own. One evening, as Kate sat by the fireplace with her grandmother, she expressed her deep concern about their community's suffering. Eleanor listened carefully as Kate spoke about her desire to help but feeling powerless as just a teenager. The old woman smiled warmly and shared a story about how even the smallest actions could create the biggest changes in the world, Eleanor told Kate about a young woman she had known decades ago who had stood up to powerful people to protect her community. This woman had faced ridicule and opposition, but never gave up on her beliefs. Through her determination and courage, she had managed to bring positive changes that lasted for generations. Kate felt inspired by the story and began thinking about ways she could make a difference in her village. She started volunteering at the local food bank, helping distribute meals to families in need. Her compassionate nature and genuine care for others made her popular among the volunteers and the people they served. During her volunteer work, Kate learned about the complex issues affecting her community. She discovered that many problems stemmed from decisions made by people in power who had never experienced the struggles of ordinary families. This realization sparked a fire within her to do something meaningful about the injustices she witnessed. Kate began writing letters to local government officials, expressing her concerns about the unemployment crisis and the lack of support for struggling families. She researched government policies and proposed practical solutions that could help her community. Her letters were well-written and thoughtful, impressing even the most skeptical officials. Word of Kate's advocacy work spread throughout the village. People began approaching her with their problems and concerns, knowing that she would listen with empathy and work tirelessly to find solutions. Kate never turned anyone away, no matter how busy she was with her own studies and responsibilities. As months passed, Kate's reputation as a young advocate for social justice grew beyond the borders of Millbrook. Newspapers began writing articles about the remarkable teenager who was fighting for her community's rights. Television reporters visited the village to interview Kate and learn about her work. Despite the attention, Kate remained focused on her mission. She organized community meetings where people could voice their concerns and work together to find solutions. She helped establish support groups for unemployed workers and created programs to help children whose families were struggling financially. Kate's efforts began showing results. Local businesses started taking notice of the village's problems, and some offered job opportunities to unemployed residents. Government officials who had initially ignored the community's pleas began taking action to address their concerns. However, Kate's growing influence also attracted criticism from some quarters. Certain powerful individuals felt threatened by her ability to mobilize people and bring attention to uncomfortable truths about inequality and injustice. They began spreading rumors about her motivations and questioning her right to speak for the community. The criticism hurt Kate deeply, but her grandmother's wisdom helped her stay strong.
Eleanor
Reminded her that people who fight for justice often face opposition from those who benefit from the existing problems. She encouraged Kate to continue her work and not let negative voices discourage her from pursuing what was right. As Kate's 18th birthday approached, she received an unexpected invitation that would change her life forever. The letter bore an official seal that made her hands tremble as she opened it. Inside was an invitation to speak at a national conference about youth leadership and social change. The conference would be attended by some of the most influential people in the country, including government ministers, business leaders, and even members of the royal family. Kate's work in Millbrook had caught the attention of people at the highest levels of society, and they wanted to hear her perspective on solving social problems. Kate felt both excited and terrified about the opportunity. She had never spoken in front of such an important audience, and the thought of addressing powerful people who could actually implement her ideas was overwhelming. Her grandmother encouraged her to accept the invitation, reminding her that this was her chance to make a real difference on a larger scale. After much consideration, Kate decided to attend the conference. She spent weeks preparing her speech, carefully choosing her words to convey the urgency of the problems facing communities like Millbrook while remaining respectful and constructive in her approach. The day before leaving for the conference, Kate walked through her village one last time, observing the changes that had occurred since she began her advocacy work. She saw new signs of hope in people's faces, and evidence of the positive impact her efforts had made on their lives. As she stood at the village's highest point, looking down at the homes and streets she had fought so hard to help, Kate felt a deep sense of responsibility. She knew that tomorrow she would have the chance to speak for not just Millbrook, but for countless other communities facing similar struggles across the nation. That evening, Kate spent time with her grandmother, drawing strength from the woman's wisdom and love. Eleanor looked at her granddaughter with pride, knowing that the shy little girl who had once hidden behind books had grown into a powerful voice for justice and compassion. The next morning, Kate boarded the train that would take her to the capital city, carrying with her the hopes and dreams of everyone who believed in her mission. She clutched her speech notes tightly, knowing that the next few days would test everything she had learned about courage, conviction, and the power of standing up for what was right. The train journey to the capital city gave Kate time to reflect on the magnitude of what lay ahead. As the countryside rolled past her window, she thought about all the conversations she had with struggling families in Millbrook and the promises she had made to be their voice. The weight of responsibility felt heavier with each mile that passed. Upon arriving at the Grand Central Station, Kate was amazed by the bustling crowds and towering buildings that surrounded her. She had never been to such a large city before, and the sheer scale of everything was both exciting and intimidating. A conference organizer met her at the platform, a smartly dressed woman named Sarah, who immediately put Kate at ease with her warm smile and friendly manner. Sarah escorted Kate to the prestigious Royal Grand Hotel, where the conference would be held. The building was magnificent, with marble columns, crystal chandeliers, and artwork that probably cost more than most people in Millbrook earned in a year. Kate felt out of place in her simple dress and worn shoes, but she reminded herself that she was there to represent people who could never afford such luxury. The hotel lobby was filled with important-looking people in expensive suits, all engaged in serious conversations about politics, economics, and policy matters. Kate overheard discussions about millions of dollars in budget allocations and decisions that would affect thousands of lives. She realized that these were the people who held the power to change everything for communities like hers. In her modest hotel room, Kate reviewed her speech one final time. She had written it from her heart, focusing on the real stories of real people, rather than dry statistics or political rhetoric. Her speech contained accounts of Mrs. Henderson, who had to choose between buying medicine and groceries after her husband lost his job, and of little Tommy Martinez, who had stopped attending school because his family could not afford new clothes. After his father became unemployed that evening, there was a welcome reception where Kate had her first opportunity to mingle with other conference attendees. She felt nervous approaching groups of influential strangers, but her genuine interest in learning about their work and perspectives helped her overcome her shyness. Many people were impressed by her maturity and the depth of her understanding of social issues. During the reception, Kate met Dr. Margaret Thompson, a renowned economist who had written extensively about poverty reduction strategies. Dr. Thompson was immediately struck by Kate's authentic passion and her practical approach to solving complex problems. They spent nearly an hour discussing various policies and their real-world impacts on communities. Kate also encountered several government officials who were initially skeptical about a teenager addressing such serious topics. However, as they listened to her speak about the specific challenges facing her community, their attitudes began to change. They were impressed by her detailed knowledge of policy implications and her ability to propose realistic solutions. Rather than just complaining about problems, the highlight of the reception was meeting Sir Robert Clark, a wealthy businessman known for his philanthropic efforts. Sir Robert had made his fortune in manufacturing, but had dedicated his later years to supporting educational and economic development programs in underserved communities. He was immediately drawn to Kate's sincerity and her clear vision for positive change. Sir Robert shared with Kate his own experiences of growing up in poverty and how education had been his path to success. He emphasized the importance of young people like her, speaking up for those who lacked a voice in important discussions. Their conversation lasted well into the evening, and Sir Robert promised to attend Kate's speech the following day. Sleep came fitfully to Kate that night as she wrestled with anxiety about her upcoming presentation. She had practiced her speech countless times, but the thought of standing before hundreds of influential people made her stomach flutter with butterflies. She thought about her grandmother's encouraging words and drew strength from knowing that she was representing something bigger than herself. The next morning arrived with typical London weather, gray skies, and a light drizzle that seemed to match Kate's nervous mood. After a quick breakfast in the hotel restaurant, she made her way to the main conference hall to familiarize herself with the speaking arrangements. The room was enormous, with seating for over 500 people and a stage that seemed to stretch endlessly before the podium as the morning sessions began. Kate sat in the audience listening to various speakers discuss economic policies, social welfare programs, and international development strategies. While the presentations were informative, she noticed that most speakers focused on abstract concepts and statistical data rather than the human element of the issues they addressed. Kate observed the audience during these presentations and noticed that while people listened politely, they seemed somewhat detached from the emotional reality of the problems being discussed. She realized that this was exactly what she needed to change with her own speech. She needed to help these powerful people understand that behind every statistic was a human being with hopes, fears, and dreams. During the lunch break, Kate had the opportunity to speak with several attendees about their reactions to the morning sessions. She was pleased to discover that many people were looking forward to hearing a different perspective from someone who had direct experience with the issues being discussed. This feedback boosted her confidence and helped calm her nerves. The afternoon session began with Kate's introduction by the conference moderator, Professor James Mitchell, who praised her grassroots work in Millbrook and her unique perspective as a young advocate for social change. As Kate walked toward the podium, she noticed that the audience seemed genuinely interested and expectant rather than merely polite, looking out at the sea of faces before her. Kate spotted several familiar faces from the previous evening, including Dr. Thompson and Sir Robert, who offered encouraging smiles. She also noticed some government officials who had seemed skeptical during their earlier conversations. Now paying close attention to see what she had to say, Kate began her speech by thanking the organizers for the opportunity to address such a distinguished gathering. She then immediately shifted focus from herself to the people she represented, describing Millbrook as a community of hardworking individuals who had been forgotten by those in power. Her voice was clear and steady, betraying none of the nervousness she felt inside. As Kate continued speaking, she noticed the audience becoming more engaged with her message. Unlike the earlier presentations that had been filled with technical jargon and complex theories, Kate spoke in simple, direct language that everyone could understand. She painted vivid pictures of the struggles facing ordinary families, making abstract policy discussions suddenly feel personal and urgent. Kate shared the story of Mr. Peterson, a skilled factory worker who had been unemployed for over a year despite sending out hundreds of job applications. She described how his confidence had eroded over months of rejection, and how his children had begun to believe that their father was somehow inadequate because he could not find work. The audience listened with rapt attention as Kate explained how unemployment was not just an economic issue, but a profound human tragedy that affected entire families. The power in the room was palpable as Kate continued to share real stories from her community. She spoke about elderly residents who had to choose between heating their homes and buying food, and about young people who had given up on their dreams because they could not see any opportunities for advancement in their current circumstances. What made Kate's presentation different from others was her ability to connect these personal stories to broader policy implications. She did not just describe problems. She offered specific practical solutions that addressed both immediate needs and long-term systemic issues. Her proposals were well-researched and demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of how government programs and private sector initiatives could work together to create positive change. As Kate continued her presentation, she could feel the energy in the room shifting. The usual rustling of papers and quiet side conversations had stopped completely. Every person in the audience was focused intently on her words. Hanging on to each story she shared about the people of Millbrook, Kate noticed several attendees leaning forward in their seats, and some were taking detailed notes about the solutions she proposed. Kate's voice grew stronger as she described the innovative community programs that had emerged from Millbrook's crisis. She explained how neighbors had started sharing resources, creating informal childcare networks so parents could attend job interviews, and establishing skill-sharing workshops where unemployed workers taught each other new trades. These grassroots initiatives had not only provided practical help, but it also restored a sense of hope and dignity to people who had felt forgotten by society. The audience was particularly moved when Kate shared the story of Maria Santos, a single mother who had lost her job at the local textile factory. Maria had 3 young children and no other source of income. But instead of giving up, she had started a small catering business from her kitchen. With help from other community members who provided ingredients and helped spread word about her services, Maria had slowly built a customer base that allowed her to support her family while creating jobs for other unemployed residents. Kate emphasized that Maria's success was not just an individual triumph, but an example of what could happen when communities were given the support and resources they needed to help themselves. She argued that government programs should focus on empowering local initiatives rather than creating dependency on outside assistance. As Kate spoke about the importance of education and breaking cycles of poverty, she shared her own story of growing up without parents but being raised by a grandmother who instilled in her a love of learning and a commitment to helping others. She described how the local library had become her second home and how dedicated teachers had encouraged her to pursue her dreams despite her difficult circumstances. Kate's personal story resonated deeply with the audience because it demonstrated that anyone, regardless of their background, could make a significant difference in the world if given the right opportunities and support. She spoke about the responsibility that comes with privilege and education, arguing that those who had been blessed with advantages had an obligation to use their position to help others. The most powerful moment in Kate's speech came when she addressed the issue of dignity in poverty. She explained that while financial assistance was important, what people in struggling communities needed most was to be treated with respect and to have their voices heard in decisions that affected their lives. Kate described how many government programs, while well-intentioned, were designed by people who had never experienced poverty and therefore failed to address the real needs of the communities they were meant to serve. Kate's critique was delivered with such grace and respect that even government officials in the audience found themselves nodding in agreement rather than feeling defensive. She acknowledged the good intentions behind existing programs while pointing out specific ways they could be improved to better serve the people they were designed to help. As Kate moved toward the conclusion of her speech, she could see that many people in the audience were visibly moved by her message. Some had tears in their eyes as they listened to her describe the resilience and strength of people facing tremendous hardships. Others were frantically taking notes, already thinking about how they could apply Kate's insights to their own work. Kate concluded by challenging everyone in the room to move beyond abstract discussions of policy and statistics to engage with the human reality of the issues they were addressing. She urged them to visit communities like Millbrook, to listen to the stories of people affected by their decisions, and to include those voices in the development of solutions. The silence that followed Kate's speech was profound and meaningful. For several seconds, no one in the audience moved or spoke. Then, slowly, one person began to clap, followed by another and another, until the entire room erupted in sustained applause that lasted several minutes. Many people rose to their feet, giving Kate a standing ovation that seemed to go on forever. But it was not just the length of the applause that was remarkable, it was the quality of it. This was not the polite, perfunctory clapping that typically followed conference presentations. This applause carried genuine emotion and admiration. People were not just acknowledging Kate's speaking ability, they were responding to the truth and power of her message. As the applause finally began to fade, Kate noticed something extraordinary happening in the audience. People were not immediately packing up their belongings and preparing to leave for the next session, as typically happened after conference presentations. Instead, they remained in their seats, many wiping tears from their eyes, others engaged in quiet, intense conversations with their neighbors about what they had just heard. Professor Mitchell returned to the SPOHEM to moderate a question and answer session. But before he could speak, someone from the audience called out a request for Kate to stay and take questions. The request was immediately supported by enthusiastic agreement from throughout the room, and Kate found herself facing an impromptu extended discussion with some of the most influential people in the way. The questions that followed were unlike the typical academic queries that usually followed conference presentations. Instead of focusing on theoretical aspects of policy development, audience members asked Kate about specific strategies for engaging with communities, ways to ensure that programs actually met people's needs, and methods for measuring success beyond simple statistical outcomes. Dr. Thompson asked Kate about her views on education funding priorities, leading to a discussion about the importance of supporting not just academic programs, but also practical skills training that could help unemployed workers transition to new careers. Kate's thoughtful responses demonstrated that her understanding of these issues was both deep and practical. Based on real experience rather than theoretical study, Sir Robert Clark asked about the role that private sector partnerships could play in community development. And Kate described several successful collaborations that had emerged in Millbrook between local businesses and community organizations. She explained how these partnerships had been most effective when they were based on mutual respect and genuine understanding of community needs rather than top-down charity models. One government official asked Kate about her views on welfare reform, expecting perhaps a predictable response about the need for more generous benefits. Instead, Kate surprised everyone by talking about the importance of programs that helped people develop independence and self-sufficiency while still providing the safety net that families needed during difficult transitions. Kate's responses to each question revealed not only her intelligence and compassion, but also her remarkable ability to see complex issues from multiple perspectives. She acknowledged the legitimate concerns of taxpayers about program costs while also advocating for the human dignity of people who needed assistance. She recognized the challenges facing government officials while still holding them accountable for the effectiveness of their policies. As the extended question and answer session continued, it became clear that Kate had achieved something unprecedented at the conference. She had managed to connect with people across political and ideological divides, finding common ground and shared concern for human welfare and community well-being. The diversity of people asking questions was remarkable. Conservative business leaders, liberal academics, government bureaucrats, and nonprofit advocates all seemed equally engaged with Kate's message and eager to learn from her perspective. Her ability to speak to universal, human values while offering practical solutions had created a rare moment of unity in a room full of people who rarely agreed on anything. When Professor Mitchell finally called an end to the session, many audience members approached Kate personally to continue their conversations. Business cards were exchanged, invitations to visit communities were extended, and commitments to follow up on specific initiatives were made. Kate found herself at the center of a spontaneous networking session that lasted well into the evening. The evening following Kate's presentation was filled with a whirlwind of activity that she had never expected. The hotel lobby became an impromptu meeting space where conference attendees continued discussing the ideas she had shared. Kate found herself surrounded by people eager to learn more about her community work and to explore ways they might contribute to similar efforts in their own regions. Among the people who sought her out was Lady Catherine Pemberton, a member of Parliament who had been working on social welfare legislation for over a decade. Lady Pemberton was known for her sharp intellect and her sometimes stern demeanor. But as she spoke with Kate, her usual formal manner gave way to genuine warmth and enthusiasm. She confided that Kate's presentation had reminded her why she had entered politics in the first place, to make a real difference in people's lives, rather than simply advancing her career. Lady Pemberton invited Kate to join her for dinner, along with several other conference attendees who had been particularly moved by the presentation. The group included Dr. Thompson, Sir Robert Clarke, and surprisingly Lord Harrison, a conservative politician who was known for his skepticism about government social programs. The unlikely gathering settled into a quiet corner of the hotel restaurant for what would become a remarkable evening of conversation. As they shared their meal, Kate found herself in the middle of discussions about policy implementation, funding mechanisms, and political strategy at levels she had only read about in newspapers. Yet despite the high-level nature of these conversations, everyone at the table kept returning to the human stories Kate had shared and asking her opinion about how various proposals might actually affect real families. Lord Harrison, who had initially been the most reserved member of the group, gradually became more engaged as the evening progressed. He admitted that he had attended Kate's presentation, expecting to hear what he called typical bleeding heart rhetoric, but instead had encountered what he described as the most practical and sensible approach to social policy he had heard in years. His transformation from skeptic to supporter was visible to everyone at the table. The conversation continued well into the night, with Kate answering questions about everything from local economic development strategies to youth engagement programs. What impressed her dinner companions most was her ability to connect abstract policy concepts to concrete examples from her own experience. When they discussed job training programs, Kate could describe exactly how such programs had succeeded or failed in Millbrook and explain why certain approaches worked better than others. As the evening wound down, each person at the table made specific commitments to follow up on ideas that had emerged from their discussion. Lady Pemberton promised to arrange for Kate to testify before a parliamentary committee reviewing social welfare legislation. Sir Robert offered to fund a pilot program in Millbrook that would test some of the community development strategies Kate had described. Even Lord Harrison, despite his usual caution about government spending, agreed to support legislation that would give communities more control over how social programs were implemented in their areas. The next morning brought another surprise for Kate when she received an urgent message asking her to attend a private meeting with several high-ranking government officials. The meeting was being held in a secure conference room at a government building near the hotel, and Kate was told only that some very important people wanted to discuss her presentation with her personally, accompanied by conference organizers. Kate made her way to the imposing government building where she was escorted through multiple security checkpoints before reaching the meeting room. The space was elegant but austere, with a large polished table surrounded by leather chairs. Within minutes, several people entered whom Kate recognized from newspaper photos as senior cabinet ministers and advisors to the Prime Minister. The meeting began with formal introductions, but the atmosphere quickly became more relaxed as the officials began asking Kate about her work and her views on various policy issues. Unlike the public conference setting, this private discussion, allowed for more detailed and sometimes sensitive conversations about political realities and implementation. Challenges. Kate was surprised to learn that several of these high-ranking officials had grown up in circumstances similar to her own and had personal understanding of the challenges facing communities like Millbrook. However, they explained that the demands of their positions often kept them isolated from the day-to-day realities that their policies were supposed to address. Kate's presentation had served as a powerful reminder of why they had entered public service and what they were ultimately trying to achieve. The officials asked Kate about her long-term goals and whether she had ever considered a career in government service. They described various fellowship programs and internship opportunities that could provide her with experience in policy development and implementation. While Kate was flattered by their interest, she explained that her primary commitment was to her community and to the grassroots work that had brought her to their attention. However, Kate did express interest in finding ways to bridge the gap between policymakers and the communities affected by their decisions. She suggested creating formal mechanisms for ongoing dialogue between government officials and community representatives, ensuring that the voices of ordinary people were consistently included in policy development processes. Officials were intrigued by Kate's suggestions and asked her to develop more detailed proposals for how such community engagement programs might work. They offered to provide her with access to government resources and research facilities to help her refine her ideas and test their feasibility. As the meeting concluded, Kate was invited to maintain ongoing communication with the officials and to serve as an informal advisor on community engagement strategies. While she would not be taking a formal government position, she would have opportunities to influence policy development in ways that could benefit communities throughout the country. Leaving the government building, Kate felt both excited and overwhelmed by the opportunities that had emerged from her conference presentation. In just 2 days, she had gone from being a young advocate from a small village to someone whose opinions were sought by some of the most powerful people in the country. That afternoon, Kate attended the final sessions of the conference. But now her experience was completely different from when she had arrived. Instead of feeling like an outsider observing important discussions, she found herself actively participating in conversations and being asked for her input on various presentations. Other speakers referenced her presentation and incorporated her insights into their own remarks. During the closing ceremony, Kate was surprised when conference organizers called her to the stage to receive a special recognition award for outstanding contribution to the conference. The award came with a small monetary prize, but more importantly, it included an invitation to attend similar conferences in the future and to serve on advisory committees for several major nonprofit organizations. As Kate accepted the award, she looked out at the audience of influential people who had become not just listeners, but active supporters of her work. She realized that her grandmother's wisdom about small actions, creating big changes, had proven true in ways she had never imagined possible. The train ride back to Millbrook gave Kate time to process everything that had happened and to think about what these new opportunities might mean for her community. She had business cards from dozens of important contacts, invitations to speak at other events, and concrete commitments from powerful people to support various initiatives in her village. More importantly, Kate had discovered that her voice could reach beyond her own community to influence discussions. At the highest levels of government and business, she had learned that the stories and experiences of ordinary people were not just important but essential for creating effective policies and programs that actually worked. As the familiar countryside came into view outside her train window, Kate felt a deep sense of satisfaction mixed with anticipation for what lay ahead. She knew that the real work was just beginning and that she would need to carefully balance her new responsibilities with her ongoing commitment to the people who had trusted her to be their voice. The train pulled into Millbrook Station just as the sun was setting. Painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Kate stepped onto the platform carrying not just her luggage, but also the hopes and commitments of powerful people who had promised to help transform her community and others like it across the nation. Kate's return to Millbrook was met with tremendous excitement from the entire community. Word had spread quickly about her success at the conference, and people were eager to hear about her experiences and what it might mean for their village. Her grandmother Eleanor waited at the station with tears of pride in her eyes, embracing Kate warmly as neighbors and friends gathered around to welcome her home. That evening, the community center was packed beyond capacity as Kate shared stories from her time at the conference. She described meeting powerful politicians and business leaders. But more importantly, she explained how these influential people had responded to the stories of Millbrook residents. The audience was amazed to learn that their struggles and triumphs had moved some of the most important decision-makers in the country to tears and to action. Kate carefully explained each commitment that had been made during her time at the conference. From Sir Robert's funding for community development programs to Lady Pemberton's promise to include Millbrook residents in legislative hearings, the community listened with growing excitement as they realized that their voices would finally be heard by people who had the power to create meaningful change. However, Kate was careful to manage expectations while still maintaining the hope and enthusiasm that her success had generated. She explained that turning promises into reality would require continued hard work from everyone in the community, and that they would need to remain organized and engaged throughout the process of implementing new programs and policies in the weeks following Kate's return. Millbrook became a hub of activity as various officials and representatives began visiting to follow up on the commitments made at the conference. Sir Robert arrived with a team of development specialists to assess the community's needs and design programs that would create sustainable economic opportunities for residents. The first major initiative involved establishing a community-owned cooperative that would provide training in modern manufacturing techniques while also creating jobs for unemployed workers. The cooperative would focus on producing goods for regional markets, taking advantage of Millbrook's location and the strong work ethic of its residents. Kate worked closely with Sir Robert's team to ensure that the program was designed with input from community members rather than being imposed from outside. Lady Pemberton also made good on her promise, inviting a delegation of Millbrook residents to testify before a parliamentary committee reviewing social welfare policies. Kate helped prepare her neighbors for their testimony, coaching them on how to share their experiences effectively while maintaining their dignity and authenticity. The testimony session in Parliament was a powerful moment that received significant media attention. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman who had struggled to choose between medicine and groceries, spoke eloquently about the daily challenges facing seniors on fixed incomes. Mr. Peterson, the unemployed factory worker, described the psychological impact of long-term joblessness and the importance of programs that restored people's sense of purpose and self-worth. Kate watched proudly from the gallery as her neighbors shared their stories with the same courage and honesty that she had demonstrated at the conference. Their testimony led to immediate changes in several government programs and inspired other communities to organize similar advocacy efforts. As these initiatives began showing results, Kate found herself in increasing demand as a speaker and advisor. Universities invited her to address students about community engagement and social justice. Nonprofit organizations sought her advice on developing programs that truly served the people they were meant to help. Government agencies asked her to review their policies and procedures to ensure they were meeting community needs. Despite these growing opportunities, Kate remained committed to her community and continued living in Millbrook while completing her education through correspondence courses and online programs. She established a small office in the community center from which she could coordinate her various activities while remaining accessible to local residents who needed her help. Kate's work began attracting international attention when foreign delegations started visiting Millbrook to study the community development model that had emerged there. Representatives from other countries wanted to understand how a small village had managed to transform itself from a place of despair into a thriving community that served as an example for others. These international visits brought additional resources and opportunities to Millbrook, but they also presented new challenges. Kate had to work carefully to ensure that the attention did not disrupt the community's normal life or create unrealistic expectations about what could be achieved in other places with different circumstances and cultures. One of the most significant international connections came when Kate was invited to speak at a United Nations conference on sustainable community development. The invitation represented recognition that the work being done in Millbrook had implications far beyond the borders of their small village or even their country. Preparing for the UN conference required Kate to think about her community's experiences in global terms and to consider how their lessons might apply to very different contexts around the world. She spent months researching international development programs and consulting with experts to ensure that her presentation would be relevant and useful to delegates from dozens of different countries. The UN conference was held in New York, marking Kate's first trip outside her home country. The scale of the event was overwhelming, with thousands of delegates representing governments, nonprofit organizations, and academic institutions from around the world. Kate felt nervous about addressing such a diverse and sophisticated audience, but her grandmother's wisdom and her own experiences had taught her that authentic stories and genuine compassion could bridge any cultural or linguistic divide. Kate's presentation at the UN conference focused on the importance of listening to communities before trying to help them, and on the power of supporting local initiatives rather than imposing external solutions. She shared specific examples from Millbrook's transformation, but she was careful to acknowledge that what had worked in her village might need to be adapted significantly to be effective in other contexts. The response to Kate's presentation was even more enthusiastic than what she had experienced at the domestic conference that had started her journey. Delegates from countries across Africa, Asia, and Latin America approached her afterward to discuss how similar approaches might be applied in their own communities. Several international development organizations offered to fund pilot programs based on the Millbrook model in various locations around the world. However, the most meaningful moment of the UN conference came when Kate was approached by a young woman from a rural village in Bangladesh who described challenges remarkably similar to what Millbrook had faced. The woman, named Rashida, had been working to organize her community around issues of poverty and unemployment, but had felt isolated and overwhelmed by the magnitude of the problems they faced. Rashida told Kate that hearing her presentation had given her hope that small communities could indeed create meaningful change through organized effort and persistent advocacy. The two young women spent hours comparing their experiences and discussing strategies that might work in different cultural contexts. Their conversation led to the beginning of an international network of community advocates who would support each other's work across geographical and cultural boundaries. Kate returned from New York with a broader perspective on her work and a deeper understanding of how local efforts could contribute to global movements for social justice. She also returned with specific commitments from international organizations to support expanded programs in Millbrook and to use their community as a training center for advocates from other regions. The success of Kate's international advocacy created new challenges at home. Media attention increased significantly, bringing reporters and camera crews to Millbrook on a regular basis. While the publicity helped raise awareness about the community's achievements, it also created pressure to maintain a certain image, and sometimes interfered with the normal life of the village. Kate worked with community leaders to establish guidelines for media visits that would allow them to share their story while protecting their privacy and ensuring that publicity did not become more important than the actual work of community development. They created a media committee that would coordinate interviews and visits, ensuring that different community members had opportunities to represent their experiences, rather than always relying on Kate as the sole spokesperson. As Kate's 20th birthday approached, she reflected on the remarkable journey that had begun with her simple desire to help her struggling neighbors. What had started as local volunteer work had evolved into an international platform for advocating community-driven approaches to social and economic development. Yet despite all the recognition and opportunities that had come her way, Kate remained grounded in the values her grandmother had taught her. She continued to live modestly in Millbrook, sharing her time between local community work and her broader advocacy efforts. She made sure that the benefits of her success were shared with her community, using speaking fees and awards to fund local programs and to support other young advocates who wanted to follow similar paths. The transformation of Millbrook had become complete during this period. The unemployment rate had dropped dramatically as new businesses opened and existing ones expanded. The community cooperative had become profitable and was providing good jobs for dozens of residents. Educational programs had been established that prepared young people for both local employment opportunities and further education that might take them beyond the village. Most importantly, the spirit of the community had been restored. People who had once felt hopeless and forgotten now walked with pride and confidence. They had learned that their voices mattered and that they had the power to shape their own destiny. When they worked together with determination and persistence, Kate knew that her work was far from finished. There were still challenges to address in Millbrook. There were thousands of other communities around the world that could benefit from the lessons they had learned. She also understood that sustaining positive change required ongoing effort and that success could be fragile if people became complacent or if external support was withdrawn. As she prepared for the next phase of her advocacy work, Kate was invited to an event that would prove to be the most significant moment of her entire journey. The invitation bore the official seal of the royal household, requesting her presence at a special ceremony where she would be recognized for her contributions to community development and social justice. Kate's hands trembled as she read the formal invitation, realizing that her work had attracted the attention of the highest levels of society. The ceremony would be attended by members of the royal family, government leaders, and other recipients of royal honors for their service to the nation. The invitation specified that Kate could bring family members to the ceremony, and she immediately knew that her grandmother Eleanor would be her honored guest. The woman who had raised her and instilled in her the values that guided her work deserved to share in this moment of recognition. As Kate prepared for this culminating event, she thought about the long journey from her childhood days reading books in the local library to this moment, when she would be honored by royalty for her service to others. She understood that this recognition was not just for her personal achievements, but for the power of ordinary people to create extraordinary change when they commit themselves to serving others with courage and compassion. The day of the royal ceremony dawned crisp and bright, with golden autumn sunlight streaming through the windows of Kate's cottage as she prepared for what would be the most significant day of her life. Eleanor helped her granddaughter dress in the simple but elegant outfit they had chosen. Together, a navy blue dress that reflected Kate's preference for understated dignity over flashy displays of wealth or status. As they traveled to London together, Kate and Eleanor reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. Eleanor spoke with pride about watching her quiet, book-loving granddaughter transform into a powerful voice for social justice, while Kate credited her grandmother's wisdom and unwavering support for everything she had been able to achieve. The royal palace was magnificent beyond anything Kate had imagined, with its impressive architecture, manicured gardens, and the ceremonial guards standing at attention in their traditional uniforms. As their car approached the palace gates, Kate felt a mixture of excitement, nervousness, and profound gratitude for the opportunity to represent not just herself, but her entire community at such a prestigious event. Inside the palace, Kate and Eleanor joined other honorees and their families in an elegant reception room where they waited for the ceremony to begin. Kate was amazed to find herself among recipients who included renowned scientists, celebrated artists, distinguished military officers, and other individuals who had made exceptional contributions to their fields and to society. Among the other honorees, Kate met Dr. Patricia Williams, a medical researcher whose work had led to breakthrough treatments for childhood diseases, and Colonel James Stewart, who had led humanitarian missions in conflict zones around the world. Despite their different backgrounds and areas of expertise, Kate found that she shared common ground with these distinguished individuals in their commitment to service and their determination to make the world a better place. As the ceremony began, Kate was struck by the solemnity and tradition of the proceedings. The palace's grand hall was filled with dignitaries. Family members and officials all gathered to witness this ancient ritual of recognizing exceptional service to the nation. The ceremony was steeped in centuries of tradition, yet it felt remarkably relevant and meaningful in the context of honoring contemporary achievements. When Kate's name was called, she walked forward with steady steps, her head held high with quiet confidence rather than arrogance. As she approached the dais where the royal family waited, she thought about all the people from Millbrook who had made this moment possible. Through their courage in sharing their stories and their determination to create positive change in their community. The king himself was presiding over the ceremony, and as Kate drew nearer, she could see the warmth and genuine interest in his eyes. She had read about his own commitment to social causes and his particular interest in community development initiatives, so she knew that her work would resonate with his personal values and concerns. As Kate stood before the king, she spoke briefly about her achievements, highlighting not just her advocacy work, but also her ability to bridge divides and bring people together around shared goals. He mentioned specific initiatives that had emerged from her efforts and their positive impact on communities both in her home country and internationally. Then came the moment that would be remembered by everyone present and would be talked about for years to come. As the king prepared to bestow the honor upon Kate, she did something that was both completely unexpected and perfectly natural. Given her character and upbringing, instead of maintaining the usual formal posture expected during royal ceremonies, Kate bowed her head in a gesture of profound humility and respect. It was not the prescribed ceremonial bow that protocol required, but rather a spontaneous expression of her deep gratitude and her understanding of the responsibility that came with the recognition she was receiving. The bow was not theatrical or attention-seeking, but rather a natural expression of Kate's character, her humility, her respect for others, and her understanding that her achievements were built upon the contributions of countless people who had supported her journey. In that moment, Kate was not thinking about protocol or appearances. She was simply expressing her authentic feelings of gratitude and responsibility. The effect of Kate's gesture on everyone present was immediate and profound. A complete stillness fell over the grand hall as hundreds of people were moved by the genuine humility and grace they witnessed. The king himself paused, visibly touched by the sincerity of Kate's gesture, and those watching could see that he was deeply moved by her authentic response to the honor she was receiving. The stillness lasted for several long moments, during which the only sounds were the quiet rustling of ceremonial robes and the distant ticking of an ancient clock. Everyone in the room seemed to understand that they were witnessing something special. Moment of genuine humanity and humility in a setting that was often characterized by formality and ritual. When Kate finally raised her head, there were tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude for the opportunity to represent her community and to be recognized for work that had always been motivated by love and service rather than personal ambition. The king's own eyes were moist as he completed the ceremony, placing the medal around Kate's neck with gentle reverence. As Kate stepped back from the king, the assembled crowd erupted in sustained applause that was unlike anything typically heard in the formal setting of royal ceremonies. The applause was not just polite acknowledgement, but genuine appreciation for both Kate's achievements and the authentic grace she had displayed during the ceremony. Eleanor watched from the audience with tears streaming down her cheeks. Proud beyond words of the young woman her granddaughter had become, she could see in Kate the same qualities of compassion and humility that had been evident even when Kate was a small child, now fully developed and channeled toward serving others. After the ceremony, Kate was surrounded by well-wishers who wanted to congratulate her not just on receiving the honor, but on the dignified way she had accepted it. Many people commented that her spontaneous gesture of humility had made the entire ceremony more meaningful for everyone present. The king himself approached Kate during the reception that followed, engaging her in a lengthy conversation about her work and her plans for the future. He expressed his admiration for her achievements, but also for the character and values she had demonstrated throughout her advocacy work. He assured her that she would have the continued support of the royal family for her ongoing efforts to help communities in need. In the days following the ceremony, media coverage focused as much on Kate's humble response to receiving the honor as on the honor itself. Commentators praised her authenticity and noted how her gesture had elevated the entire ceremony, making it a more meaningful experience for everyone involved. The recognition Kate received from the royal family opened even more doors for her advocacy work. But more importantly, it validated the approach she had always taken, that genuine service to others, rooted in humility and compassion, was the most powerful way to create positive change in the world. As Kate returned to Millbrook with her honor, she was greeted by her entire community, who had gathered to celebrate not just her individual achievement, but what it represented for all of them. The recognition she had received was proof that the voices of ordinary people mattered, and that communities, working together, could indeed change the world. Kate's journey from a quiet, book-loving child to an internationally recognized advocate for social justice had come full circle. She had achieved success beyond anything she had ever imagined. But she had never lost sight of her roots or forgotten the values that her grandmother had instilled in her from an early age. Standing before her community that evening, Kate reflected on how a simple desire to help her neighbors had led to a lifetime of service and to recognition at the highest levels of society. She knew that her work was far from finished, and that there would always be communities in need of advocacy and support. But she also knew that she had proven something important, that one person, motivated by love and guided by humility, could indeed make a difference in the world. The stillness that had filled the royal hall when she bowed her head in gratitude would always remind her that authentic service, performed with genuine humility, had the power to move even kings and to inspire others to join in the vital work of building a more just and compassionate world.